They said it was disrespectful for me to marry first. "You should have waited for your sister," my mother hissed. "You ruined her moment." That was 2 days before my wedding, and on the actual day, they didn't show up. The front row seats stayed empty like a scar carved into the celebration. No call, no excuse, just silence, like I didn't exist. But the worst part, they weren't sick. They weren't out of town. They were in Charleston having brunch with Evie, my sister, the one they called our only real star. While I stood at the altar alone, my parents were drinking mimosas and laughing across town. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about a lifetime of being their afterthought. The quiet child, the invisible daughter, the one they kept around out of obligation while pouring everything into her. I could have cried, I could have begged, but instead, I chose to rise. I took back what they stole, the house I inherited, the money they funneled into Evie's art career, and the illusion they fed to everyone that we were a perfect Southern family. Now that image is crumbling, and they're the ones left in the silence. Hi, I'm Sarah Whitlock, and this is the story of how my parents skipped my wedding. Because I refuse to play second place one more time. Before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Just drop a hi in the comments or tell me where you're from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. And if this already pulls at something inside, you hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. I was born and raised in the Battery, Charleston's most pristine and proper neighborhood, where porch swings creak in rhythm with gossip and family names carry more weight than kindness. In my family, image was everything. Harold and Beatrice Whitlock. My parents were the epitome of Southern gentility, graceful in public, ruthless in private, and obsessed with the illusion of perfection. From the time I could speak, I understood that love in our home came wrapped in conditions. You were adored if you fit the mold. If you strayed even slightly, you became invisible. And I was a little crooked from the beginning. My younger sister, Evangeline Evie, as the world called her, was everything they wanted. Tall, graceful, porcelain, smooth, and artistic since birth. She painted by candlelight at 7, spoke French by 10, and by 14 had already won a citywide painting competition. When I earned a scholarship in English literature, my mother wrinkled her nose. "Wouldn't you prefer something more feminine like design?" she said, flipping through Evie's sketchbook with pride. The night Evie won her first award, my parents rented out Charleston Club for a private dinner. They had her painting framed and mounted above the fireplace just beneath the antique French chandelier centered lit worshipped. When I asked if I could hang one of my framed diplomas somewhere in the study, my father muttered, "Let's not clutter the walls, Sarah." That night I stared up at the painting, pink peonies brushed with delicate strokes. Evie's initials scrawled elegantly in the bottom corner, and I felt myself shrink. I had been made to take ballet for 6 years, though my feet were clumsy and my hips refused to glide. I dieted obsessively at 16 because my mother often said Evie's never had trouble with her weight, has she? One summer, I tried modeling only because Mom suggested it, an utter disaster that ended with me in tears behind a dressing screen in New York. She didn't comfort me. She simply said Evie never cries when things don't go her way. Eventually, I started to believe it, that I needed to earn affection through perfection. That love was reserved for the palatable, the graceful, the extraordinary. And because I was none of those things, I learned to smile on command. I became the polite one, the helper, the listener, the invisible daughter standing just outside the frame of the family photo. The painting above the fireplace became a symbol, not just of Evie's talent, but of my parents' choice. Their declaration hung at eye level for all to see. The house itself, our family's historic home passed down from my mother's side, was another silent sentence. It had been willed to me in name, but my parents held onto it like it was their birthright, managing everything, refusing to transfer the deed, speaking of it only in phrases like, "Our home, our legacy, never yours." And then there was the pearl necklace. When I was 25, I asked to borrow it for a friend's wedding. My mother's eyes went cold. "That necklace is for Evie's wedding day. It's a tradition." I hadn't even started dating anyone seriously at the time, but I understood. In her mind, I wasn't the daughter you prepared pearls for. I was the backup plan. That day, I stopped asking. But I never stopped noticing. By 40, I'd long abandoned the exhausting chase of trying to be the good daughter. Instead, I opened an antique shop in the French Quarter, tucked beneath a canopy of crepe myrtle and Spanish moss. It smelled of wood polish and quiet stories, faded maps, forgotten letters, broken frames waiting to be whole again. That shop became my sanctuary. It was there during a modest antique auction in Savannah that I met Theodore Langston. Theo wasn't flashy. He didn't sweep into rooms or make grand declarations. But he had a calm presence and a gentle eye for the history behind objects. We bonded over a cracked Victorian tea set. And somehow, he never stopped coming by. 4 years passed easy and quiet. No scandals, no spectacle, just coffee in the morning and documentaries at night. One weekday evening while eating takeout spaghetti and watching Antique Roadshow, Theo turned to me and said, "Would you want to make this permanent? Just come home with me forever." There was no diamond, no crowd, no hidden violinist. Just him and me and the kind of comfort that felt like sunlight on the skin after years in the shadows. When I called my mother to share the news, there was silence. Then, really. But Evie's not even engaged yet. My father sighed. "Where are you thinking of hosting it? Just don't overdo it, Sarah. You're not a celebrity." I tried to swallow the sting. I hosted our engagement dinner at FAG, invited only close friends and family. My parents showed up 30 minutes late, stayed for 20, then left with the excuse, "We have to call Evie. She's securing a New York investor." They barely acknowledged Theo. Didn't ask about the venue, the guest list, or even my dress. My mother pulled me aside and whispered, "You might want to drop a few pounds before the big day. That A-line cut can only do so much." Still, I sent the invitations. I made sure one electronic, one handwritten went straight to the house in Battery. Signed for, confirmed, delivered. No RSVP, no call, no email. When I reached out again, my mother replied vaguely, "We never got anything." Then she swiftly changed the subject. "Evie's looking at lace from Italy. Middleton Place might be available in the fall. Just imagine her walking down that path with the live orchestra playing." That's when I saw it. On their home computer during a rare visit, a Pinterest board titled Evie's Dream Wedding. Dozens of pinned floral arches, gold-rimmed china, monogrammed favors. Evie wasn't even engaged. But they were planning. For her. When I asked them directly, my father finally said Evie should be the first. "She's the one who carries our name with pride." That was it. The silence at FIG had meant something. The empty chairs were deliberate. The polite indifference wasn't forgetfulness, it was choice. I looked at the head table that night where 2 seats remained untouched. One had a place card that read Mother of the Bride, the other Father. My mother-in-law had complimented my dress, elegant, understated, "You look radiant." My own mother had called it acceptable, thank goodness for sleeves. I realized then I was never meant to be celebrated. Not by them. I boxed the remaining invitations that night, but before sealing them, I tucked 2 aside, one for Harold, one for Beatrice. Not because I believed they would come, but because some part of me still ached for the moment they'd walk me down the aisle and simply choose me. Planning my wedding was supposed to feel like a celebration. It felt more like a polite rebellion. Magnolia Plantation. Theo's idea was draped in wisteria and Spanish moss, an old garden estate I had admired since my childhood. His mother and I pored over every detail from the linens to the champagne to the exact shade of ivory lace on my gown. She called it graceful, without trying, and when I slipped it on, I saw myself reflected differently in the mirror for once, less like a shadow, more like a woman, stepping into her own light. But not once during the months of preparation did I hear from my parents. No phone call, no voicemail, no polite inquiry about flowers or invitations. The silence wasn't surprising. It was consistent, cruelly familiar. I sent a second round of invitations, this time hand-delivered to the home on Battery, signed for by their housekeeper. Still nothing. Not a word. Just silence that said more than any rejection could. A week before the wedding, Evie posted a photo of herself in a bridal boutique in Manhattan, wearing a lace couture gown and holding a glass of rosé. The caption read, choosing something special for what's coming soon. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to hear her say it aloud. The day of my wedding was warm, with a Carolina breeze that whispered through the magnolias. The gardens glowed with late spring color. Friends, neighbors, Theo's colleagues, and cousins gathered in soft voices and soft pastels, smiling as I walked with his mother down the stone path. Theo's face when he saw me so full of peace and pride, I nearly forgot the ache in my chest. But then I passed the front row. 2 empty chairs stood just behind the floral archway. My parents' names etched on white place cards. A guest leaned toward me and asked, "The bride's parents, are they running late?" I didn't answer. I smiled the kind of smile I'd mastered since I was 5. There was no father-daughter dance. The song played anyway, lilting through the trees, while I stood in my gown beneath the moonlight, Theo's hand in mine, lips clenched so tightly I tasted blood. After our honeymoon, I made the call I had rehearsed for a week. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. "I hope you're well," I said, trying to keep my voice level. I wanted to ask, "Why didn't you come to the wedding?" She sighed, already annoyed. "Sarah, let's not go down this road. We never received an invitation. I had receipts, photos of the delivery confirmation, screenshots of the opened emails. I texted them after the call, but no reply came. What did come was a follow-up message: Evie's exhibit in Savannah is next month. We'll be flying down for it. You should come. Support your sister." I sat alone in our kitchen that night, lights off, wedding photos spread across the table. I stared at the image of me and Theo kissing under the trellis, the 2 vacant chairs lingering in the corner of the frame like ghosts. Later that week, as Theo and I were signing documents for the purchase of a new property, he frowned at one of the statements. "Did you know funds from your investment account have been withdrawn monthly for the past 3 years?" I shook my head. "That's impossible. I haven't touched that account since I opened it in my 30s. Theo tapped the page. "It's listed under dual control. Your father's name is on it." And just like that, the foundation beneath me cracked again. I had signed over temporary co-ownership when I was younger, back when I still thought trust was something owed to blood. I had forgotten. He had not. The withdrawals weren't small, and one of them, large and recent, had been deposited into a fund titled the Pembroke Arts Initiative, Evangeline's passion project. My name funded it. My savings made it possible. I called my attorney the next morning, just to be sure. I had him look into the status of the house on Battery, the house I had assumed was mine by inheritance, the house left to me by my maternal grandmother, the house I had never dared ask for because I knew how tightly my parents clutched it. What he found was worse than I imagined. A revised deed had been filed 5 years ago without my knowledge, reclassifying the property as a shared family estate under the protective management of Harold Whitlock. No signature from me, no notification, and worse, the house had been used as collateral in a loan taken to fund Evie's gallery expansion the previous year. I stared at the folder of documents, my name printed neatly at the top, underneath pages of betrayal. I thought of that empty chair at my wedding. I thought of my mother saying I needed to lose weight before the big day. I thought of the pearl necklace reserved for Evie's future wedding if it ever came. I looked at Theo. "I want it all back," I said. "Not for the money, not even for revenge. I want it because if I don't stand up now, I will spend the rest of my life apologizing for being born second." The first call to the attorney was the hardest. The rest came swiftly, as if the very act of standing up had unlocked a version of me I hadn't allowed to exist. We began the legal process to reassess the ownership of the Battery house and freeze any further activity on the investment account. Formal letters were sent, requests for documentation, a demand for an explanation. My father responded with a single-sentence email. "Your ingratitude is astounding." He left a voicemail a day later. "You have no idea what it takes to support a daughter with Evie's gifts. You wouldn't understand. You never had them." I booked a meeting with them. I wanted no more distance, no more buffering through attorneys. I needed to look them in the eye. We sat in the same living room where Evie's painting still hung above the fireplace. 15 years and still untouched. I stared at it for a long time before I spoke. "I'm not jealous of Evie's success," I said quietly. I'm jealous of the love you gave her so freely, the way you made her feel chosen. My mother raised an eyebrow. Because she earned it. My father leaned forward. And you always found someone to blame for what you didn't get. Maybe it's time you learned to wait your turn. I breathed in slowly. Then I'm reclaiming the house. I've frozen the accounts. I don't need your apology, but I won't let you take from me anymore. I stood up, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors as I turned away. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait to be called back. A few days later, a message from Evie lit up my phone. You've made a mess of everything. My wedding's coming up, and now people are asking questions about you. I didn't reply. Another message followed. If you actually cared about this family, you'd shut your mouth. You're ruining everything. Our name. My plans. Still, I said nothing. Until Theo told me she had called him. She said I should help you calm down. Before things got worse, he told me, visibly disgusted. She said I needed to remind you of your place, that you were never built to handle this kind of attention. He recorded the call, and after listening to it together, he turned to me and said, hearing her talk like that, I've never been more certain I married the right sister. I looked around our house, our real home, the one built not on borrowed pride, but on mutual love. They had betrayed me financially, ignored me emotionally, undermined me publicly. But this was different. This was clarity. I no longer cared if they understood. I just knew one thing: I was done letting them tell me who I was. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt like someone stepping into the light and locking the door behind her. For 3 weeks after I reclaimed my inheritance and froze the investment account, the silence from my family was deafening. No emails, no threats, not even a stray remark from Evie on social media. I mistook it for a retreat, an exhausted truce. Then the storm broke. It started with a phone call from my mother-in-law. Sarah, I don't mean to alarm you, she said gently, but there's a rumor going around that you're being investigated for forging inheritance documents. My stomach turned. The next day, I learned my parents had been whispering tales through Charleston's tight-knit social circles, claims that I had manipulated legal documents to steal the house on Battery. They painted me as a bitter, ungrateful daughter taking advantage of her aging parents. A longtime friend, the owner of a bridal boutique who'd invited me to co-host an antique lace exhibit, suddenly pulled out. I just can't be involved in all this noise, she said, her voice shaky. I heard from someone close to your family, and now Evie's name is being dragged into it. I'm sorry, Sarah. Within a week, orders from trusted partners were canceled. Buyers ghosted me. My shop, once warm with voices and curiosity, fell silent. I stood behind the counter, staring at the door, willing someone to walk in. No one did. Then came the next blow. A house I once collaborated with for estate auctions forwarded me an anonymous email. Evie had contacted them directly. She questioned my ethics as a valuer and accused me of misrepresenting provenance in several cataloged items. The words were careful, laced with plausible deniability. Poison disguised as concern. I dug deeper. She had been working with contacts in the art world, weaving a narrative that questioned my integrity. And she didn't stop there. She submitted altered versions of appraisal documents, cropped and edited to imply negligence or fraud, all bearing my name. Then came the letter. Delivered by courier, formal, cold, and heavy with legal language. Harold and Beatrice Whitlock were suing me for unauthorized seizure of family property and for unilaterally freezing assets of a joint account. Attached was a copy of a will allegedly left by a distant cousin, naming Evie the sole heir to the house on Battery. The signature didn't match. The notary stamp was expired. But to the untrained eye, it looked real. I took it to my attorney, who examined it with a sharp frown. This was prepared by someone with legal access, but not a conscience. And he knew just the person. Years ago, my father had worked closely with a lawyer named Edward Cormack, a man who had since lost his license after multiple ethics violations. He resurfaced last year quietly under the radar. We suspected he had helped forge the will. And suddenly everything made sense. The confidence, the coordinated attack, the careful timing. Then came the headlines. Heir at odds. The Whitlock family's bitter legal battle over historic home. A glossy piece filled with unnamed sources and loaded quotes from friends of the family. In it, I was described as volatile, entitled, and estranged. One sentence read, "Some say Sarah's obsession with antiques mirrors her inability to let go of the past even if it was never hers." An old friend messaged me, "I don't know what to believe anymore. If it's true, I'm just really disappointed." I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I stopped going into the store. I lay in bed for hours, blinds drawn, listening to the buzz of doubt inside my own head. If your own family believes you're the villain, then who are you? And then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Uncle Joseph, my mother's younger brother, called out of the blue. "I know what they're doing," he said, "and I'm done pretending it's okay." He sent me a file. It held the original will signed by my grandmother, notarized, properly registered officially, and naming me as the sole heir to the Battery house. Evie was not mentioned. My parents were trustees, only meant to hold the property in my name until I turned 30. "I kept quiet for too long," he said. "They threatened to cut me off if I said anything. But Sarah, watching them tear you down like this, I can't be silent anymore." My hands trembled as I held the document. Proof. Truth. I called my lawyer, I sent the file, and then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I stood up, got dressed, and made a plan. I booked a hall in downtown Charleston, a space known for antique exhibitions, and set a date. If they wanted to destroy my name in public, I would clear it in public too. The auction room buzzed with low conversation as guests arrived. Collectors' gallery owners, journalists, and family friends I hadn't seen in years. I'd sent out formal invitations, some hesitant, some ignored, but enough responded to fill the chairs. At the bottom of each invite, I'd written, "The value of an heirloom is not just in its price, but in the story it carries. Some stories deserve the light." The first half of the event went smoothly. Rare brooches, pre-war clocks, Civil War letters passed from hand to gloved hand. I smiled, nodded, answered questions. I looked calm. But under my skin, my pulse was a steady drumbeat. Then came the moment. I stepped onto the platform. The room quieted. "I'd like to share an item of particular significance," I began. "It's not for sale, but its value has shaped more than my career. It has shaped the last 6 months of my life." Behind me, the screen lit up. 2 documents, side by side. "One of these is a forged will," I said. "The other is the original left by my grandmother declaring me sole heir to the house on Battery Street." Gasps rippled across the room. "This one," I pointed, "was used to justify a lawsuit against me. The other was hidden, until now." My lawyer stood confirming the validity of the document and our formal counterclaim for attempted fraud. But I wasn't done. "I've also brought something else," I said. The recording began to play. Evie's voice echoed from the speakers, sharp and rehearsed. "If you love her, then help her stay quiet. She's embarrassing herself. And us." The room fell into stunned silence. I took a breath. "I didn't come here to destroy my sister," I said. "I came here because for 60 years I believed silence was grace. That keeping peace was noble. But silence allowed people I loved to rob me of identity, agency, and dignity. I'm not here to make you choose sides. I'm here because I won't be ashamed of standing up anymore." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone did. My mother's sister, Aunt Caroline, stood up. "Harold, Beatrice," she said clearly, "we were wrong. All of us. We stood by while you lifted Evangeline onto a pedestal and pretended Sarah didn't exist." Murmurs of agreement followed. People who had kept their distance now leaned forward. An old colleague reached for my hand. A journalist scribbled furiously. Later that evening, an article went live. "From Scandal to Strength, How Sarah Whitlock Reclaimed Her Name." A week later, we stood before the judge. The court declared the contested will a forgery. The notary stamp was proven falsified. The original will, the one Uncle Joseph had provided, was reinstated. The property was legally and permanently mine. The account had been drained, but what remained was returned to me. Evie's gallery came under investigation. Sponsorships vanished. Her name dropped from 2 museum collaborations. Her silence for once worked against her. At the courthouse steps, my mother walked by me. She didn't speak, didn't even pause, just passed like a stranger in the street. and for the first time I felt nothing. No ache, no wish for approval, just peace. They had chosen an illusion of perfection and lost their only daughter who had ever waited for their love without conditions. I returned to the house on Battery. It was quiet, still draped in memory, but it belonged to me truly legally finally. The painting of Evie still hung in the drawing room. I took it down carefully, rolled it in linen, placed it in a cedar box. On the lid I wrote, and for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid of what would come next. Winning the lawsuit should have felt like a full circle moment, like I'd climbed out of the wreckage, brushed off the dust, and could finally breathe. And yet the next morning, as I opened my antique store and stared at the shelves where orders once waited to be picked up, now stripped bare, I realized something. Justice doesn't fill the hollowness left by a family that no longer claims you. I had the house my name restored and articles praising my strength. But I no longer had parents to call on a Sunday afternoon just to say the azaleas were blooming early. No texts from a sibling checking in before the holidays. I had won the battle, but lost the illusion of home. Then came something unexpected. A piece in the Charleston Arts Weekly titled, "The Soul Keeper of Heirlooms, Sarah Whitlock's Quiet Revolution," hit the front page. In it, the journalist called me a curator of Southern memory and described the house as a living archive of dignity reclaimed. Slowly, the tides turned. Collectors who had distanced themselves sent cautious emails. A few former collaborators offered apologies, asking if I'd consider reopening commissions. One even sent a bouquet of magnolias with a handwritten card. "Charleston needs your eyes and your backbone." The most surprising came from a group of local historians. They wanted to host an exhibit titled, "Inheritance of the South," right inside the house I had just fought to keep. I walked the hardwood floors that evening, hand brushing along the carved banister of the staircase, and realized something else. Maybe I couldn't undo the damage, but I could transform the ruins. So I opened the first floor of the house every weekend to the public. Free entry. Each room featured a curated set of antiques, and every item had a story. I told those stories aloud. I told them not as a dealer, but as a daughter, a woman, a survivor. After one of the sessions, a young woman lingered behind. Her voice trembled as she said, "You're the reason I believe I can stop apologizing for being different." That night, I began writing again, not out of anger, not to settle scores, but to mark the trail. A record for anyone who has ever been told they were too quiet, too plain, too forgettable. A memoir. Tentative title, "The Room They Never Noticed." Then an envelope arrived. Cream-colored. My sister's handwriting. Inside, no apology, no admission, just a few neat lines. "I'm sure you're enjoying your victory. My wedding's canceled, the gallery's shutting down. I hope you're proud of what you've done." No remorse, just blame wrapped in sorrow. I folded the letter and placed it inside the same cedar box where I had stored her old portrait. On the lid, I labeled it, "What I Survived." Months later, at a family dinner hosted at Magnolia's my parents attended. No one approached them, not even to say hello. A cousin clinked her glass and said to Sarah, the woman who reminded us what resilience looks like. My mother flushed. When someone asked her if she was proud of me, her voice rose sharply. She snapped, "I don't know what you people are so impressed with." A guest recorded that exchange, and it circulated quietly through Charleston's social groups. The Whitlock image, pristine, sophisticated, shattered beyond repair. But I didn't feel triumphant, just settled. That night, I returned home. Theo was in the kitchen, stirring sauce. My mother-in-law sat nearby, knitting a scarf in soft gray yarn. The porch light cast honey-colored halos on the stained glass of our side window. And I finally understood family isn't just blood. It's where you don't have to audition to be accepted, where no one asks you to shrink so someone else can shine. Later, I sat at my desk with a warm cup of tea and opened my journal. The first line of my memoir read, "I once believed I was the leftover thread in the Whitlock tapestry, but now I know I was simply woven from a different cloth." And that's not a flaw. It's the reason I still hold. The last light of summer stretched long across the veranda. Theo and I sat in our white wooden chairs, the kind that creaked gently under you, as if they remembered every season they'd weathered. From where we sat, we could see the bay glinting in the orange wash of sunset. A sailboat drifted quietly, silhouetted against the clouds. I poured us both a cup of jasmine tea. The breeze carried the faint scent of wild daisies from the back garden, mingling with the fading warmth of the day. For the first time in what felt like forever, my heart beat without panic. Theo leaned back, content. I watched him for a while before saying quietly, "When I was little, I used to think happiness meant hearing my father say he was proud of me." He took my hand, kissed the inside of my wrist, and now I stared out at the red-tipped horizon. Now I think happiness is living without disguising your bruises. Being loved for who you are not, for who you pretend to be. Just then my phone buzzed. An email from the South Carolina Cultural Heritage Foundation. They wanted to feature my home in a permanent public history program. The proposal read, "We believe this house and the woman who brought it back to life deserves to be called the Memory Keeper's home." I smiled. There had been a time when I believed my memories were burdens. Now I understood they were blueprints. I decided to add one final installation to the gallery, an empty frame. Below it, a simple plaque. "For those who are forgotten, you are seen." I didn't hang Evie's painting again. The space it left reminded me not every bond must be preserved. Letting go isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's survival. I never forgave my parents. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. Forgiveness is for the one still waiting at the door. It had already walked through it. That night, I turned to Theo. "You know, I said I used to be the shadow cast by a painting hung above the fireplace. Now I'm the wall, and I choose what stories get displayed." He smiled and touched my cheek. "And you're the reason that wall has a soul." Darkness fell softly around us. The city lights flickered on one by one. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the magnolias. No more trying, no more needing, just peace. Peace earned, peace kept, peace chosen. Sometimes the hardest thing we ever do is walk away not in anger, but in peace, because healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about choosing what no longer deserves our pain. And in that choice, we reclaim ourselves. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for listening.